What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Dripping Creativity Podcast. I am your host, Chris Corvan, and today we are diving into the shadows with debut author Vanessa F. Born in northern Newfoundland and raised in rural Nova Scotia, Vanessa has always loved writing, though it is only in recent years that she had shared her dark imagination with the world. Her debut novel, The Witch of the Willow Sound, arrived September 30th, 2025, already earning a starred review from Forward Reviews and being named one of the Canadian Independent Booksellers Association's most anticipated books of the year. That is amazing. Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. I'm doing very, very well. Thank you.
Excellent. Good. So you have described yourself as an introvert and shy with a creative journey that has been quiet until recently. How has stepping into the public space as a published author changed the way you think about your writing and your process and everything?
That's such a good question. It really did start when I started writing this novel. And just before that, I wrote a screenplay. So my whole life, I've been writing in every format you can imagine. I do screenplays. Sometimes when I was young, I would just carry a binder around with loose leaf and a pen, and just everywhere I went, I would write. And I would have books I would have binders that had thousands and thousands of pages in them. So I thought I needed a little discipline. And so I learned screenplays and playwriting just to rein myself in a bit. But I've always had to kind of surrender to that desire to write. I've always had that. But the idea to share my writing with the world came from some people that I know recently, especially my partner, who is a musician, and very natural for him to be sharing. It's a performance-based art. And so his very, kind and compassionate, gentle guidance to say, maybe you could write something that someone might want to maybe read. So when you're writing something that someone else might read, it sort of changes the purpose and the meaning behind what you're doing. You think more about who's going to read it, because before everything I wrote, I would just write it, put it in a drawer, and then write it something else. And that was always lovely. That was fine. That was all I needed. But when you're writing with the idea that maybe one other person might read it, and I thought maybe I would be lucky if one other person might read it, you really have to think about what's important for them, what's meaningful for them. So I tried to do that. My very first and second try. So it has this part now, this part of speaking to wonderful people like you. When I got to the point of, when I finally finished the manuscript and thought maybe it was polished enough to maybe send out to, some publishing companies, I just sort of, it started this wonderful journey of meeting the kindest, most wonderful, helpful, compassionate, intelligent, and patient people. And I include you in that as well. So this part of the journey has been surprising. I don't know, I guess I didn't know what it would be like, and I was very nervous about it. But, being a shy person, anyone out there who's shy and an introvert will relate. It's a big, big step. But there are wonderful, wonderful people once you do get that courage and that encouragement to bring your art out of the shadows and into the light.
No, that's an absolutely amazing journey as somebody who was also raised in screenwriting and really had no intention on publishing anything ever. Like even for the longest time, I was very much, even after I published my collection, I was like, I'm not an author. I write because I need to do it for other things I want to do, but I don't consider myself an author. It wasn't up until recently where I kind of made that mental decision. It's like, oh no, I'm an author. This is part of who I am now. You have to embrace that next step, much like you said there. And to do that, it's scary. It is absolutely terrifying to do. And to find people that have been nice and helped you through that is amazing. That is such an awesome way to have that story come through. I love that. Okay, so Growing up in northern Newfoundland and rural Nova Scotia, two places with deep natural beauty, but also kind of isolated, how do those landscapes kind of live inside you and show up in your stories?
Um, that's a great question. They're a huge part of me. So not only does my family come from those beautiful, isolated places, but also, my mother's family is coal miners in Cape Breton, and my father's family were cod fishers in Newfoundland. Now, to Canadian, that means a whole lot. There's a lot of history there. So not only did we, live in these places that a lot of times in, some parts of Nova Scotia and some parts of Newfoundland, you don't have the same services that everybody else has in Canada. Very different living in a city than it is living up north. Could be, there's no police, there's no fire, there's no hospitals, there's teeny tiny school, with four people attending. So very, very different experience. But also, coal miners and cod fishers, they make their living from the land. Very dangerous jobs as well. And, even though traditionally it would be, the men going in the mines and the men going out on the boats, the women and children in the families were part of that industry as well. So very, very deep into the bones of the story, into the bones of myself. But also, one thing that I found out when I was beginning to research for this, I didn't always know this, was that Nova Scotia had for generations been known as the lost person capital of North America because of the woods. There's so many woods. Yes, so you could step off your back porch in Nova Scotia into the woods, and there are many stories about that. So when I learned that statistic, which I hadn't always known, I thought, well, I grew up in those woods and I played in those woods, so I never thought, I was out there defying death in my little shoes, but I guess that I was. So that's absolutely true. I think probably for where you're at as well, the land and how we make a living from the land really fits into the bones of who we are.
Oh, definitely. I mean, Calgary is a little different when it comes down to it, just because we are very diverse in how many, expats we have and all of that here. It's very oil-based, but I know by my lineage, my grandparents and all that, they, farmers and just small town living all the way through. Like, yeah, no, it's getting down and dirty all over the place. It's kind of
Yes,
Canadian stories, really what it boils down to.
very true. Yes.
Okay, so moving into your writing there, you say you write dark things. What draws you to the darkness, and do you see it as a comfort, a confrontation, or maybe a little bit of both?
Oh, that's very interesting. You're asking questions nobody's ever asked me before, so now I have to think about that. I've
That's my
always
job.
You're so good. Well, I've always loved horror ever since I was little, and I leaned into fantasy. I think when I was very, very little, the things that I wrote were for my brothers. I have two younger brothers who I love very, very much, and I have the older sister, and I look after them. But I would write what could be classified as like illustrated nonfiction for them. So like, this is where the cookies are. This is who your family is. This is what the neighbor, map of the neighborhood. But then, so I remember in grade 2. When I learned, I don't know if you know this, I'm sorry if I have to break this to you, I learned that unicorns are not real. And I'm still skeptical, but I remember thinking, well, I don't like that. That's not going to work for me. So I remember vividly, I had my little pink clipboard and my loose leaf and one of those little sparkly pink pencils. And I wrote a world where unicorns were real. And that sort of started, and that was very sparkly and pink and rainbow at that time, but I was 7 or 8 years old. But so definitely that kind of escaping into the fantasy world. And I think maybe I enjoyed the darkness. It would come from one of the roots, I think, would be renting movies do you remember renting the movies from the corner store, and you would get a deal like 5 movies for $3. You get to keep them for the weekend.
Those were the
Best
days.
covers. Yes, the best covers were always, those the scary movies, the horror movies. They always had the hook, you could tell it was spooky just by looking at the cover. So when I was old enough to be allowed to watch some of those, and maybe I did watch some horror movies, maybe a little maybe a little younger than I should. So that's part, it's kind of the cultural introduction there to horror, and I just loved it. It was just, I associated that with weekends with my brothers and watching movies with my mom, and that kind of joy, ironically, or maybe you know, it makes perfect sense. And then later on, you know, I love close reading of literature and books. Some of, you know, the classics that we read in school, growing up in Canada, maybe some of them have little, you know, little bits of dark moments, and you find that those emotional things of being scared, or, you know, having a dark realization, those are sort of those emotional moments that just sort of hit you right in the chest and put you back. I love those. I love that. That's my favorite kind of, you know, that gives me shivers in movies. It gives me shivers in music. I love, you know, that heavy metal music. And the same for when I'm writing. I'm always chasing that feeling. So I think that the darkness doesn't necessarily come from a dark place. I think it comes from, you know, an appreciation for literature and history as well. So I went to Dalhousie and did my, I have a master's from there, and I studied literature. And, you know, you study any kind of English literature, it always gets a little bit dark. I don't know. It just does, because it's reflecting real life, and real life, you know, is not unicorns and rainbows every day. Many days, but not every day.
Bottom line is, narwhals are real.
Yes.
There's got to be unicorns. It's just,
be.
Logistically, it makes sense.
I'm with you.
Okay, let us now dive into The Witch of Willow Sound. So it evokes both gentleness and unease. How did you land on the name, and what role does the setting play into shaping the atmosphere of the novel?
Oh, the name. But gosh, well, it came from the character. You know what? I remember the naming of things has always been, that's such a great question. The naming of characters and the naming of places is one of my favorite parts of writing. Often it just starts with the name of a place, and it kind of puts you in, for me, it puts me in the mood, and it's where I'm going to be when you're writing a novel. As you know, when you're writing something, you're going to be in that place in your mind for a long, long time. So you want it to be, yeah. And same with the characters. You're going to be hanging out with those characters for a long, long time, more than with real people sometimes.
Pretty sure most of my friends are in my head, so it's okay.
Very, very good. Did any of them come out now? No. Sorry. Yeah, so then I remember, actually, I knew I wanted to be nature. I knew it wanted to be based in the land. And I knew I wanted it to be not exactly perfectly clear what it was. So I went in and I looked up different, and one of my favorite names and words is willow. And the fact that it evokes, you know, has always evoked, you know, that sort of, you know, the darkness and the death. I mean, when you look at the old headstones, like Nova Scotia has some of the oldest headstones and headstone art in Canada, because, you know, we've been, you know, putting up those kind of things for a long, long time. The willows are on there, and the willows are planted in the graveyards, and just the word willow is a lovely word. So it's so evocative. So I went looking up kinds of willows, and looking up kinds of geographic, the names of geographic structures, I guess you would call it, like a sound. And I just love the ambiguity of the word sound and the way that it could, because I like the writing to be as sensory as I can, to kind of immerse. That's a Gothic thing, as you know. I know I've looked at some of your stuff too. I know that you're very immersive in that way. So I just thought, and it just sounded, when you say it, it just sounded kind of good. So I thought, well, I'll try that. I'll go with that. And it stayed through the revisions and things that stayed. And sorry, the second question, how does the land, sorry, what was the second question again, Chris? My brain let go.
Actually, you just kind of nailed it. So there's how did you land on the name and what role does it play in shaping the atmosphere? That actually kind of answered all of it right there. So you nailed it. All right, so moving on to a big thing, because I've never been on a most anticipated book list. What does that kind of recognition mean for you as a debut author, especially one who admits to being an introvert?
Oh, that's a good question, because part of what my plan was, being an introvert and being very nervous, was to just when the book was out there, then just go hide under the covers and then come out maybe a year from now. Just come out and peek out from under the covers and see that it's all past and it's safe to come out now. But so the wonderful thing about it, and I know that the nomination came from someone in Nova Scotia, which I think means the absolute world, because part of what I wanted to really do with this, because I was born in Newfoundland but grew up, and lived in Nova Scotia for most of my life, and I love it here so much. It's so beautiful. Things are changing here, as it is, everywhere. Things are changing. So I really wanted to write sort of a gothic love letter to Nova Scotia. So I sort of feel like the recognition goes to this beautiful little province that we have in the history. And the little things will change, and change is good, but we want to hold on to some of those little and gentle and wonderful historic things. And so the recognition, it's really, it's filled my heart. It caught me off guard, really, quite, because I didn't know if anybody would read it, if it would resonate. But I know a lot of people who are in Nova Scotia love Nova Scotia, like you said yourself. It's a beautiful spot to imagine yourself being, a beautiful spot to visit and to be here. So it really feels like a celebration of Nova Scotia. And I'm so proud and so deeply, deeply grateful. For my whole life, I will be grateful.
It is. If anybody's out there, like if you go to any other place besides Alberta to come check out everything we have, because it's awesome. Nova Scotia and Newfoundland are just gorgeous. It's magical out there, and I'm hoping to get there sometime in 2026. I would love to do a cross Canada thing. It would be amazing. But anyways, moving back along here, without giving too much away about the actual story there, can you talk about the central figure of the witch in your story, and what does she represent to you besides the surface of the folklore?
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Be careful not to give anything away.
It's hard not to give away the spoilers, man. When you get talking about your book, you're like, I want to blurt everything out at you because I love it.
And also, it's in my brain, so I have to remember that it's not all in there. Let's see. So she really is part of the themes, I would say. The central figure of the Witch of Willow Sound. So the main themes of the book would be sort of family, and it being in 2025, that could be your family of origin, but also your found family. Incredibly, incredibly important. So both equal, both beautiful and important. So exploring that theme. But then when you're exploring family, especially if it's in a Gothic novel, you're going to have, it gives you a really rich, almost a bottomless exploration of themes. So it's a lot about being, an outsider. It's about being inconvenient, not necessarily to your family, but to the community, really. And that sort of feeling of, there's a theme of loneliness that's very pervasive there, because as you said, with northern Newfoundland and with Nova Scotia, there's beautiful, but also isolation. That's a part of that. And also kind of the importance, as I said before, of the local history, and also the importance of your family history. I mean, that's a huge part of, what you should be proud of, what we're kind of losing perhaps a little bit. A part of, one of my first professional jobs was in the Nova Scotia archives. and what a wonderful, got to put on the white gloves and go in there and touch things that nobody had ever touched, or very few people had touched. So that really inspired me as well. So I think the Witch of Willow Sound, without saying anything else, represents a lot of the themes that I tried to explore in the novel.
Amazing. And kind of speaking on the themes and all of that, and isolation, both physical and emotional seem to be at the heart of a lot of Gothic tales, including this one. How did you approach writing isolation in a way that felt haunting, but also very relatable and deeply human? The tough questions, man. I'm telling you, I'm digging right into that brain.
I love this. This is amazing. Let's see. And I know I feel like I know why you're asking this, because I've read some of your stuff. I was reading Shadow, Shiver, Silence, which I saw the title of that and I was like, oh, hello, I have to the cover. But I know that you've explored that kind of interiority as well, almost the Gothic psychology. You do. Yeah. You're doing something I've never, if I may say so, you're doing something I don't really see very often. You have this, because, for me, the Gothic setting, it starts with the setting, like the external, and that's what you think of when you think of the old movies like Mario Bava and the old Nosferatu 1922. It was about the atmosphere of the setting. But you sort of have this psychological setting. Your Gothic atmosphere is inside the mind. I mean, that's extremely cool. I'm sorry if I'm just saying that.
I've never about this stuff all the time, but yeah, no, like when it comes to that, before we get back on topic here, I am a firm believer that every genre and everything can be horror if you're phrasing it through psychology, because that's where the scariest things happen, is in your mind. So, if I can channel that, and it's something everyone relates to in some way, and so it's easier to connect. And I'm a deeply messed up person in my brain, so that's where I go.
This is why we're getting along. Okay.
But yes, how did you approach writing the isolation in a way that makes sure that readers stay engaged? Because that's kind of the other half, is a lot of times, if done wrong, isolation comes off as boring. You managed to not have that. So was it something you actually kind of went into to kind of make sure the audience was able to stay engaged?
Well, I think what I tried to do with that, I've reflected the theme of isolation in many, many characters, in many different ways. So they all have their different backstories, experiences that got them to this moment of this book. And so they all sort of have that in common, but it's different ways. Also, being, because I did thankfully discipline myself with the screenwriting. When you're doing, as you know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, you got to move. The pace has got to go. You only have so many pages to get all this plot out, and we learn about the beats and everything like that. That was so influential on because although I do love, the Gothic setting and everything, I wanted that plot to move. So a lot of the isolation, I sort of reflected it in not these drawn out moments, but in, the feeling of maybe not all the way being alone. And also of course, with the Gothic, the primary setting is this little cottage in the woods that's decaying, in the middle of Nova Scotia woods, mind you. That's decaying. It's sort of been abandoned. There's something terrible has happened. It's sort of falling apart and dark. The person who should be there is not there. So just sort of that spookiness, the feeling, the unsettling feeling of that's not right. That's not the way that should be. This little cottage that should be full of, the smells of baking cookies and pies and candlelight from inside. Why is it so dark right now? So I really tried to reflect the isolation, in the setting, in the spooky things that are happening, but also keeping the plot going, because you want the reader to, want to turn the page and find out what is happening next. I hope that answers your question, Chris.
Absolutely perfect. Absolutely. That actually brings up a interesting thing that I've talked to other writers about, because I am a writer who coming from screenplays and all that, I write in scenes. Like there's a lot of other writers out there like Sarah Burton there who write the whole story. Like you're seeing the flow of everything, whereas I'm just showing you moments. I'm showing you, the most important moment of this character's life up to this point, and then we go to like it. So I block my scenes kind of like I would in a movie. Is that something that when you are doing your writing process, are you kind of seeing that screenplay first and then translating it, or is it a totally different way of writing for you?
I'm not a planner. So for screenplays, I do plan out because it's very strict. It's almost masochistic in how strict you have to be, right?
It's
like writing
ridiculous, really.
Yeah, it's really, really strict. So novel, a little bit more freedom, but I was, strict on myself, as you would be too, because you wanted to keep going. So with the novel, I just started with the setting, and I started with the name of Willow Sound, and I just sort of let the story take me where it was going to go, as many authors do. But I think the discipline that I gained from writing all the screenplays really helped me to see it that way as well, to see it visually, right? And sometimes I had to flesh out a little bit, because in a screenplay you are bare bones. You're just like, and you leave a lot of the interpretation to the actors, of course. But for novel writing, you've got to give the advantage, I guess, of a novel is that you get that interiority of the characters' minds. And for me, it's like Fade it's a first person point of view character. So literally, and you can't get any closer than inside the literal mind of another human being. And so, to answer your question, I think I didn't plan it out that way, that there would be scenes, but I think the wonderful lessons that I've learned and the discipline from the screenwriting helped me to work that way and see it that way.
It's so fun to talk to different writers about their styles, just because there is no one set way. Everyone does it slightly different, and the best ones I found are ones that have something completely different than anyone else. It's not one of these, I followed this person's writing style, or I did this exactly. It's like, no, I kind of did it like this and it turned out. And it's like, well, it turned out amazing, so keep doing that,
Yeah.
All right, so reviewers have praised the book's sense of foreboding and lingering dread. How do you personally build in that suspense on a page? Like, do you start with an imagery, a sound, pacing, psychology, or a goal to the scene? Talk us through one moment.
Oh, that's okay. So I do know to a point, I know what's going to happen in a scene once I'm there, once I've decided then that's the next thing that's going to happen. So I think the first bones that come down is the action, what the character or character is going to do. And think about it, you kind of, in that, when you're thinking about it that way, the thoughts are kind of action as well. Yep. So even if if the character is standing and staring at something, there's a lot going on in their mind.
The old game of what if this happens, and yes, it's the tree branch. I get it.
Yeah, yes, that's right. Yeah. Yep. Yes, I love that. Oh, that's a great image. Sorry, that's in my head now. And then I sort of build it out with like I said, I love the sensory aspects of it. So I try to build and as many of the senses that I can get, because sort of like when you're writing a novel, like the sight is default, maybe hearing is a little bit default. So I had to be kind of disciplined with myself. And when you do your first draft, and then you do your second draft, and then you do your 20th draft, you go over. One of the things I was sure to do is make sure that I had, spoken to the senses, and that they were also feeling that, because when you have a feeling of dread and foreboding, it's your whole body, and then you start seeing things, and then you start hearing things, and you're like, what was that feeling that brushed against me? So horror can be, you can just be cloaked in a terrifying moment, It's tingling all of your senses. So that's maybe the fun part of writing. It's dreadful for the person reading it and for the poor character who is going through
That's the fun part. I'm telling you, I've told people this before. It's like I am a very happy and loving person. But man, there is nothing better than terrifying a reader or destroying a character's world. There's just something juicy about it. I'm twisted. I get it. I totally get it.
You are so layered. There's so many layers to Chris.
One giant onion, I'm telling you here. So let's actually talk about the relationships when it comes to Gothic literature. Often they have a tension between intimacy and danger. Can you give us kind of a no spoilers how that tension kind of plays out when it comes to the Witch of Willow Sound?
The tension, as I said, one of the things that I explored was family and family history, and sort of that being inconvenience a community, or being sort of held outside community, or perhaps a character might hold themselves outside the rest of the community by choice, isolating themselves. Just that's enough of the world, which was sort of like where it sort of started, because if just wanting a moment to be away from the crazy world of 2025 on Earth. Maybe I wanted to go write and in my mind live in a tiny cottage in the woods in Nova Scotia for a little bit of peace. But I think that for me, exploring the relationships that were really based in the family, the found family, or the hope of found family and maybe not having it, the push-pull of those relationships and the tensions of that, and also the weight of family history, of things, said once that reverberated through a family and changed it forever. There can be a lot of desolation and loneliness and a lot of tension just in, when you can have two characters with a long dark history, who've not seen each other for years, you get them together in a room, and that room is going to be crackling with static and unspoken things, and things that they shouldn't say that they're maybe going to say, and just that feeling. I love the Gothic, the setting. Gothic is important, but sort of that whole romantic era Gothic, the power of the emotions, fear, and as you said, exploding the worlds of characters, lots of emotions there, but also you can have intense emotions, just two people who are not speaking to each other in a room together. So I exploring all different kinds of that kind of tension as well. Plus also what was that sound behind me? What is that strange thing in the corner? That kind of tension as well. So much fun.
Keep it up. You got to keep that actually kind of brings up a good side question here, which is when you were in the process of writing and rewriting and getting up to draft 20 or however many you actually go through there, do you find a point where you're worried about having too much description or visual input into the story? Like, did you have to dial yourself back, or did you have to go through and actually add more in?
I actually had to add more in, and I think it was because of the screenplay bare bones, the habit that was still in my bones for writing. So I added more in, but that just made for a wonderful experience then, because then you could just get yourself into the scene and just feel it, almost like casting a spell over a scene. Just to overuse the metaphor now, but literally just like the bones was there, and just even the meat was there, but just putting all the decorations on it. Yeah, I had to add it in. That's an interesting question. What do you find? Do you find that do you have to add it in or cut it out?
It's it depends. A bit of both, but only because what I initially add in doesn't actually, the words don't usually exist for what I'm seeing in my head. So when I put it on the page at first, I go back through and I'm like, that's not exactly what I want people to see. So I have to literally go through and kind of dissect what I'm seeing in my brain to find the right words to then piece it together. Because again, in my head, the entire world is there. I know every nook and cranny of absolutely everything. And the quick writer in me, like the initial first draft, is just like, oh, I assume everyone else can see it too, so I have to go back and actually inject those things in, where it's like, okay, people don't actually know, what color that person's hair is, because I've never actually mentioned it through the entire book. But I know it's blonde, they don't.
Oh, so, that's interesting. I love that.
Yeah, it's very well, and even with the screenwriting thing, it's kind of like, it is certain things that would be someone else's job once it's out of your hands. Like that type of visual thing is not something that is intrinsic when it comes to a screenwriting position. It doesn't really matter, because it could be anything.
That's true. And it's not, when you're a writer, it's maybe not up to you what it's good.
Exactly. But with writing your own novel, is you are the director, you are the casting agent. You have to make sure everything gets across without saying too much, because I've seen that a lot with some other books where there's entirely too much exposition on what's happening, or too much description, and you get lost in the weeds, where it's like, this is no longer scary. Like, there's a very fine line when it comes to horror, especially, where it's like you need to get it across without belaboring the point and making it not scary anymore.
That you're so right. That's maybe one of the hardest parts of the art. So we all, whether you have to add things in or cut things out, we all have to end up at that same exact little spot. And with Gothic, it's, the temptation would be, to over describe the whatever, but there's so much. That one of the things that I love about, and this is what it goes back to your very, very first question, was, when you're thinking of the reader and you're thinking of, the meaning, you also think about, or I also thought about, I don't want to over describe what the characters look like, what the setting looks like, because once they read it, it belongs to the reader then. So how we imagine our character when we're, we know the world inside out, but when they read it, this is sort of the deal that we've made with a reader. And because you're probably a big reader as well, I'm a big reader too. This is the sort of the deal, is that what those characters look like to me, that doesn't matter anymore. It's how they imagine it, so actually maybe there's an important technique in leaving that exposition out. It was important maybe back in the Victorian era. What did they call the baggy monsters? They called the books because they were so huge. I took a course in the Victorian literature. Oh my gosh, it was a lot of reading. The books are like this big. But so maybe it was important for back then because the novel was so new. But for now, everybody sort of knows what novels are. They know how they work. And we've made this deal with the reader. Okay, here's this book, The Witch of Willow Sound, The Cottage, the main character Fade. They're yours. They look like whatever you imagine them to look like. So maybe there's an art into leaving some of that out, because that's for them to imagine.
I think it's true, but it's also a very fine line, because at the same time you also want to make sure your vision is coming across as much as possible. I akin it a lot to like tabletop role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons and things like that, where it's like, I've built the sandbox for you, and you go and find what you want to see, and then I will show you what you are looking at as much as I can, without making it feel like you have to look right here and right here. It's entirely different conversation that I can go on for hours about, but we're gonna keep things locked down here and bring it right back to the book.
You'd be an amazing person to play D&D with.
I'm a lifetime DM, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it.
Awesome.
Oh, my world, and people are going to be tired because I keep mentioning this on the podcast there, but it's an old campaign that I ran, and then the players kind of stopped, so I've recreated the world where the players failed beating the bad guys. So now it's a post-apocalyptic world where the bad guy won, and that's where the entire world is now.
Oh my god, look at you beaming. Yes.
it's a twisted and wild world. It is like a post-apocalyptic D&D meets sci-fi. It's just, I love it. I love it. Anyway,
Amazing.
it's very good. All right, so we only got a couple more questions left here, and then we'll wrap it up and let you be on your way. But many debut authors talk about a hidden theme that kind of only emerged as they were finishing the manuscript. Did you discover any surprises in your own book once you kind of stepped back and looked at it as the full picture?
Yes, so many. I think mostly because, I did start with the setting and the name and sort of the idea of the main character, the point of view character. I didn't know who else was going to come along. And the main character, Fade, is so different from myself. So writing through her point of view was very surprising. Picking a protagonist who would do the exact opposite of what you would do in a situation is quite interesting. Sometimes I was like, I don't think that's what she should do right now, but she's like, no, this is what we're doing. I've already done it. So I love characters like that. So and the themes really, almost like the themes come out as the other characters arrive and as the story sort of forms itself. If you get those feelings right, maybe in yourself, right? Because you feel the feelings of what you hope the reader will feel and what you want the characters to feel. The themes sort of come from the characters as they come. So yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if you are yourself a discovery writer or a plotter. But for myself, it was all discovery. So I looked back, and one of the characters that I wrote is one of my favorite characters that I've ever written, and they just came out of it. It's like, is it Stephen King? I think, who has that. I can't quote it verbatim, but I think this beautiful thing that because he's a pantser as well, and he says that he just lights a fire in the middle of nowhere in the dark, and he just sees who shows up. Lovely way to describe it. So the characters that showed up, they sort of, and their relationships to the main character, sort of without even that sort of planning, they had they carried the themes with them, the things that they wanted to talk about, or maybe felt that should be talked about out in the middle of the isolated parts of Nova Scotia.
It's a fantastic answer. I absolutely love that. That was so good. As for my own, I'm a mix. I have a specific term for it I'm working on, but it's I know this. It's basically a D&D style thing. Is how I write. It's like I know where I want the story to end up, and I know where I'm starting. And if the characters, as I'm getting there, detour into something else, it goes where it goes. A perfect example is actually Where It Remains. My romance novel was actually supposed to be a horror thriller. Like, that was the initial intention when I created these characters. And when I got into the main character, Vesper, it's like she was such a damaged character that before I could do anything else, she needed to figure out who she was. So that's where the story came from. That's where, and then it evolved into an entire novel that is, a sapphic romance novel. And I was like, okay, here we are.
Yes, the character Vesper told you okay, I got some stuff to work on, Chris. You're the psychology writer. Here we go.
Yeah, it was not what was expected at all. And I scrapped the rest of that stuff. It's now on the shelf waiting for, another day. But it's like, yeah, that's where the story went to. So, the DM went, okay, that's where we're going. Okay.
I love that.
So to kind of wrap this up here, final question kind of about the book here. What was the hardest scene to write, either emotionally or technically, and how did you kind of push your way through it?
there, what I can't say what it is, because but there was one scene that it was hard because it was it's sort of like the big scene that I had sort of been, as I said, I'm not a planner, but I sort of knew that I knew something. So I'm trying to be very careful. So what I did with that, and just the nature of the writing of that, but also how you depict that, this is what I do when I'm stuck, is I didn't have writer's block, but it was like I didn't know technically or even emotionally how to do it. I turned to poetry, is what I did. So I don't know if you do this, but when you're sort of like, I don't know, you just open up your favorite poets that you always go to. I love Robert Frost. I love T.S. Eliot. Like these ones you could tell that I studied. And I love a poet named Iogawa, and just reading some poetry, and just sort of, because who to better sort of do this sort of intense scene that has to have the emotional, but also the visual, and also like, I don't know what to do, to crack open some of the greats, the ones that your favorite, the ones that inspire you. And, when you read that poem, you could read it once or 20 times. Every time you're like, how do they do that? Not necessarily aspiring to that, but just to kind of crack open my skull a little bit. Because then when it's technical thing, you sort of get in your head a little, you know what I mean? You start like focusing on the technique. So to pull yourself out, and so reading poetry, but also the fact that just sort of, it had been lurking in the very, very back of my mind for 2 years, that was, yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that. Just the way that you write. But that's such an interesting question. I hope I haven't given anything away.
No, you're totally vague enough. It worked out quite good. No idea what you're talking about. We're good. But no, like when it comes to that, like poetry, definitely I can see that really helping, especially if it's something you really helped you kind of push through other things in your life. I found that's kind of like it's a safety blanket to go back to. Like for me, music always, especially for art scenes, it's like I'll figure out what emotion, and then I'll pull those songs that evoke that within me, and kind of work through the scene in my head that way. Music is definitely my go-to when it comes to it.
So that's how you crack open your skull, with the music. I love it.
Honestly, music is also the inspiration for a lot of stories. Like I'll go for my like nightly walks, and put the music in there, and I'm kind of zoning out or whatever, but it'll trigger a specific scene in my head, just one moment, just one really intense thing, or a monologue or something, and as I'm walking, I'm just churning it over in my head, and then I'll plop it down and I'll go, okay, what is this? Kind of figure out where that fits in there, and most times it'll spawn a story or a poem or something that has nothing to do with what the original thing was, but that's just kind of my gateway, is just one scene, and it usually comes from music. So
that's great. Do you listen to music when you write?
I listen. I have to have some kind of background noise going. Usually it's either music, or I'll have one of my go-to TV series or movies just playing in my headphones at a lower volume, just because I need to silence all the other voices in my head. So to have something in the background making noise allows me to focus one voice at a time.
Oh, that is spooky and fantastic.
It's a curse, my friend. It's a curse. Okay, so final questions here. Looking ahead, what do we have going on in the future?
Oh gosh. Oh, that's a good question. I'm hoping that it's opened up some opportunities for me, that to, like, for this one, like example, this one today, meeting you, all these lovely, wonderful people that I'm meeting. My world is suddenly full of these creative, fascinating, cool, wonderful people who have the same things in common with me. I mean, I've been sort of, when you have your head down writing, you sort of forget that the rest of the world exists. So I'm loving meeting people, loving meeting readers and writers. My world is kind of fascinatingly full right now. I would love to get home to Newfoundland, to visit there. I haven't been for a while. And I feel like, going there will really, inspire whatever I will work on next. So I think, just sort of, I guess, regular things. I'll keep reading and I'll keep writing and I'll keep spoiling my cat. And I think that's wonderful, amazing people, and with little bunches of quiet writing in between.
Amazing. That is so refreshingly normal. I like that. It's not something like, usually it's like, oh, I have this project, I have this project, I have this project, it's 20 other books coming and all of this. It's just like, no, I'm gonna chill, I'm gonna go hang with my cat and do some writing in the sun. We'll see what happens. It's like, that's amazing. That is honestly the dream right there.
Yeah,
I love that.
oh, you're so wonderful. Thank you.
All right, so to wrap this up, where can people find you and your book?
Oh gosh, well, ecwpress.com is where you can go to pre-order the book. The book will be coming out September 30th in stores. And myself, I'm on Instagram. I'm very new to that. I sort of had to set it aside to write, but so I'm on Instagram at Vanessa F Penny. And I have a website that my wonderful son made for me, which is vanessapenny.ca. And I'd love to hear from people. I would really love to.
Absolutely amazing. And of course, all the links are going to be down below. Thank you so much for joining me. You are absolutely wonderful. We're going to finish this one up and then we'll chat a bit more after. But yeah. All right. So, Vanessa, thank you so much for sharing absolutely everything with us today. The Witch of Willow Sound arrives September 30th, 2025. Make sure to grab a copy. It is well worth it. I will be posting my review and all of that stuff up when I have time and I could get around to it. Make sure to follow Vanessa on Instagram. Big shout out to ECW Press for setting this up. You guys are wonderful. I absolutely adore you all. You have been listening to the Dripping Creativity Podcast. My name is Chris Corvan. You can find me everywhere at Chris of the Void. This has been a House of Void and Dripping Creative Catalyst Cafe community production, and I am tired. So until next time, remember, stay creative, stay inspired, and I'll see you soon.